The Inspiring Insights show is recorded on stolen land. This land is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee. The land we live on was settled in an unjust way, and that continues to cause harm. We at Reawaken Co. commit our actions toward decolonization of this territory and Turtle Island as we as a company grow. Our host Erin has enjoyed certain privileges from this white capitalist society and is working from their own social location to honor the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, especially the calls to action numbers 18 to 24. To learn more, you can click the Learning and Continuing Education link in our Instagram bio at reawaken_co. All right, hello. I'm so happy to be welcoming everyone here tonight on this live recording of episode 26 of Inspiring Insight. Episode 26, people. Woo! I am your host. My name is Erin Edwards. My pronouns are they and them, and I'm in the business of amplification. What I mean by that is that I look inside myself every day and I ask myself this question: what makes me feel alive? What makes me feel inspired? And the answer to that was born through the development of this podcast and vodcast show called Inspiring Insights. This is brought to you by Reawaken Co., which is a company that I created a while ago, a couple months ago. We're pretty new, but we help consult with folks to help them kind of walk through the natural wellness and holistic wellness world in good company. So, helping you find the practitioner that you need for your own sort of healing. And, what brought me to Inspiring Insights was the ability to really connect with and interview folks who are also in this field doing amazing, wonderful, beautiful things. I absolutely love hearing and sharing the passions of other practitioners and other wellness coaches and counselors and social workers and everything else, to really spotlight them and see all the incredible things that they're working on to guide folks to a better version of their own life and their own health. So Reawaken Co. is an online education platform, like I said. Listen in on Reawaken Co. Inspiring Insights on YouTube, or the same on Spotify or Google Cast, or whichever platform you listen to podcasts on. And you can also check out my website. It's theerinedwards.com for more information on myself, my services, and the services that Reawaken Co. offers. So tonight we are bringing a very special guest into the spotlight. Hello, Lisa. Thank you for being here.
Hello. Hi, Erin.
Tonight we have Lisa Derencinovic, which is, I just learned how to pronounce your last name and it's amazing. Thank you for being here. I'll read your bio, Lisa, and then we'll get right into the discussion.
Sure.
Perfect. So Lisa has lived her life as a woman with a visual impairment. She was diagnosed with a genetic eye disease at the age of 4. At 4 years old, she couldn't pronounce the long, complicated name of her disease, never mind understanding what was happening. She was in denial for a good 15 years after that. Her vision got to the point where denial was no longer an option. She was going to attend university and needed to travel on her own and get around a busy downtown campus. So she learned how to use a white cane and started using JAWS. Is that how I pronounce it?
Yeah.
JAWS, yeah, JAWS, a computer program that makes the computer more accessible. She also got involved with her local CNIB office and attended FFB conferences. Getting to know other visually impaired people her own age really helped her find her way towards acceptance. After her first FFB conference, she talked on the phone for 5 hours with a friend that she had met at the conference. I love that. And to say that it was smooth sailing ever since she went to university and started identifying as a woman with a visual disability would be a big fat lie. There were moments when she wanted to scream with frustration or just give up and hide under the covers. Yet the bumps in the road taught her to keep focusing on achieving her goals. The support of her family and friends really helped her stay positive. Being able to laugh at herself and laugh at some of the funny situations that come up from having low vision kept her from getting stuck in negativity. Lisa is more than a woman with a visual impairment. She is a woman who loves to read, has dabbled with creative writing, finished a half marathon, and makes a mean eggplant lasagna. Yes. She brings all of herself and her experiences into her role as a counselor. Lisa, thank you so much. That is such a beautiful, amazing introduction to you, and I'm so excited to get further deeper into that. I recall that I had emailed you that I'm just going to use this bio from your website, and you were like, do you want a shorter one? And I'm like, no, this is amazing.
Yeah. It's I'm surprised I don't get too many requests for the eggplant lasagna recipe.
Well, consider this a request. I am expecting one. I love a good lasagna.
It sounds delicious.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Liz. So, Lisa, I guess maybe we can start off by you telling us a little bit more about your story and how you came about social work and where you are right now in your life.
Yeah. So as I alluded to in my bio, when I came to university at first, I was in a process of kind of finding myself and becoming comfortable with my identity as a woman with a disability. And so I don't think I really had a kind of firm idea of what I wanted to do with my life. And actually at that point I was studying English and wanted to become a writer. But I decided kind of after a while that English was not really kind of giving me many career options, and that I actually wasn't as interested in being as a writer as I thought I was. And so during that time, I had been volunteering with a peer support group at CNIB, and that led me towards social work. And I had found that experience really positive and rewarding. And so I thought, to get more education, to, know what the strategies and techniques are that can be used in different settings and with different populations would be really helpful. So then at that point, I went to Ryerson and studied a bachelor's in social work, and then also got my master's in social work there. And then I worked in the community doing some group facilitation with different populations. And then I came to a point where I had the opportunity that lent itself to opening a private practice. And then that's where I've been. And it's kind of been a journey of growing the private practice and, serving different populations and looking at, how to grow myself as a counselor and doing different things like, just like this.
Wow, yeah, thank you for that. That's amazing. I just wanted to, for everyone that's listening, because I know some folks that listen to the podcast aren't actually in Canada. So CNIB stands for Canadian National Institute for the Blind.
Yes.
Also, I kind of want to ask you this, Lisa. We can get into it later when we talk about ableism, but the word blind, is that something that we're like phasing out of, or is that still kind of like a kind of regular term to use?
So there's a whole bunch of different terms that people use, and it can be a very individual experience. Blind is still on the list. And I think it's very much because in some ways it's a shortcut and the other terms aren't as well used. But also because for those who are totally blind, it seems like that does describe, their experiences and their situation better than some of the other terms. So some of the other terms are visually impaired, partially sighted, low vision, legally blind.
Okay, nice. Thanks for that. Yeah, that sheds a bit more light on it. So that's good to know. It's deeply personal, right? Yeah. And just before we go ahead as well, what's FFB?
Oh, it's the Foundation Finding Blindness.
Okay, got you. Okay, great. Thank you for that.
No problem.
And so, Lisa, you mentioned that you're also trained as a social worker. So as a social work counselor, what's the difference between counseling from, you know, a social work perspective versus maybe a psychologist or going to see a psychotherapist?
So there's a few different professions that are involved in counseling or therapy, and some of them are more different and some of them are more similar. So I would say a psychologist is definitely a bit more different than a social worker. A psychotherapist can really depend on where the psychotherapist has done their training, whether they would be more similar or more different from a social worker. But in my mind, I see a social worker as being grounded in looking at the different parts of a person's life and bringing in the social aspect, bringing in the political aspect, as well as the psychological and emotional parts too.
I love that. That's amazing. When you said the political aspect, it brought a smile to my face, because that's so much, you know, when we remove person's politics or a person's culture from their healthcare journey, or even not even their healthcare journey, but just their life's journey. You know, that's removing and dismissing a huge part of their lived experience.
For sure. Yeah. And also, I mean, a person's political identity and how politics affects a person's identity can be very important in the therapeutic process. So, for example, with my clients that are dealing with blindness or partial sight, I do talk about ableism and talk about how does that create your own expectations of yourself, or how does that create expectations of yourself in society, and then how is that projected back onto you?
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. We have to talk about those things, you know. Yeah, shedding a light on that is so important, and really, you know, maybe something that folks haven't actually thought about before in the context of, you know, the thing that they're struggling with. So
yeah,
it's always good to get back to that. What were you going to say, something?
Oh, I think also, like, again, because, you know, even beyond ableism, we can also look at it in other ways. And there's so many ways that our different aspects of our social location can impact the narratives and the discourses that we've internalized and that we just kind of take as, you know, taken for granted.
Social location. Yeah, that's another great term that I don't think a lot of people know about. I was recently introduced to that terminology, the actual use of social location, and really what it is, you know, for folks who don't know, that socially locating yourself is a way to kind of understand where you're coming from, and also let other people know who you're interacting with. You know, the privileges that you have, and at least that you're acknowledging those.
Yeah, and it's also can be a tool to use in therapy as well, or, you know, in counseling, as a way to kind of look at how you're understanding yourself and how society is understanding you.
Nice. I love that. Thanks, Lisa. So you talked about this a little bit, and you touched on it in your kind of university days, but I would say, if I were to ask you maybe what unique lesson has your vision journey really taught you about the overall kind of healing journey, and maybe taking that lesson and applying it to the folks that you help, what have you have to say about that?
I mean, living with vision loss has taught me to be adaptable and to do a lot of problem solving. And I guess maybe, you know, to look at not getting stuck in my emotions, because there can be a lot of frustration. You know, for example, like this morning, the orange fell from the fridge, and there is nothing harder to find than a rolling orange on the ground. But you know, I'm trying to be like, look at it through, you know, kind of more of a positive, sort of way of being like, okay, let's play some orange soccer around the kitchen. But even if I did kind of feel those moments of frustration, kind of like letting them go through me rather than getting stuck in them.
Oh, that's powerful. That's powerful for everyone, everyone whose oranges fall from their fridge.
Yeah.
Letting that process go through you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's profound. Thank you. Whew, I'm just gonna let that sit for a second. It's really nice, and because I come from the mindfulness scene, this background that I'm in, and it's the same sort of process when someone says, like, let the breath breathe you, almost. Like, this is your medicine, and you belong to it, and it belongs to you just as much.
Yeah, and I definitely bring in mindfulness into my practice as well, too. And I think it's also a tool that I use myself, too.
Yeah, that's amazing. Which brings me maybe to my next question, which is, who are your main clientele, and what kind of struggles do they face? Yeah, maybe let's start with that.
Sure. So I do specialize in people with disabilities, and within that, people living with vision loss, blindness, and partial sight. And then sort of aside from that, I also work a lot with women. I tend to work a lot with people who are experiencing grief and loss, and then also anxiety and depression, and just kind of general self-esteem and stress reduction and wellness stuff too.
Yeah. Okay. And in that process, say that I'm a person experiencing grief or loss, or anxiety or depression or anything that you mentioned. Why would I look to social work, counseling, to help me grow and evolve?
I think sometimes people have experienced therapy as being somewhat of a space that isn't as welcoming, and sometimes it can feel a little bit judgmental. And I think there has been an attempt to look at the power dynamics within counseling and therapy through social work, and that acknowledging, how that role is, and looking at, how is that space sometimes not as welcoming as it could be or as it should be. And that I think is maybe one of the biggest pieces, that can be different, or that can be what someone is looking for in terms of finding a space where they can talk about what they need to talk about.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Lisa, because there is some sort of, and it's changing every day. And I can only speak from my own experience. Like, I grew up in Newfoundland. There's not much happening. In terms of normally fashion and everything kind of takes a couple years, after the fact to get there. And, there's still quite a strong stigma attached to going to therapy, or even going to see somebody, or even just having someone there to support you, which is, almost an oxymoron for me now. Since I've been through so much therapy and counseling, it's a beautiful thing, and I would recommend it to anybody. But there's still so much stigma attached to,
for sure,
getting help, and letting go.
Yeah. And sometimes there can be a lot of fears attached to going for counseling or therapy, and that, maybe the counselor or therapist is going to judge them, or, not see what they're going through. And then sometimes there can be that mental stigma. There is that word crazy that still gets used. And so well, I don't want to go to a counselor because I'm not crazy, or I don't want to be told that I'm crazy.
Yep. That's a big one. And you don't even want to be seen going into the clinic. That's a big one. And it takes not only a village to kind of
Mhm.
change that and reckon with that, but it really takes the ability to like be a bit more mindful and be a little
Mhm.
bit more compassionate with yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And, maybe kind of like look at that word and kind of, see that it is problematic and that it does bring a lot of stigma along with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Even just using the everyday word, crazy. It's generally, overused and
Yeah, yeah.
actually quite problematic. And I don't mean to laugh, but that's like
Yeah.
how my body reacts to it sometimes.
Mhm.
So speaking of problematic, Lisa,
Mhm.
can we chat a little bit more about ableism?
Mhm.
And for folks, who maybe don't know what ableism is,
Mhm.
although I'm sure you've heard it before, it's, the discrimination, harassment, sometimes even violence or including violence, experienced based on someone's disability.
Mhm. Yeah. And I would also add the exclusion and the barriers experienced in terms of lack of opportunity as well.
Yeah, yeah, lack of opportunity. So
Mhm.
also, these concepts that we talk about, in terms of ableism, like I would say that they're also embedded into our
Mhm.
systems,
Yeah.
right? It's everywhere.
Yes.
Um, what has been your experience on that, Lisa, just in terms of the barriers that you faced?
I would say that there's a combination. There's the attitudinal barriers of, the ways that people think. There have been barriers related to more of kind of like um, more sort of like physical things. Um, Maybe not so much physical, but for me, more sort of like technological,
Mm.
that can create barriers. And then as well, the systemic barriers as well.
And by technological, do you mean like what is that?
That would be, the lack of accessible software and websites, and even different types of video conferencing. You know,
Totally.
we have this experience of, you wanting to use a different platform, and it just wouldn't work with my screen reader, and so we had to pick another one.
Yeah, and shout out to Webinar Jam.
Mhm.
Yeah, you should really optimize your your software. Usually, I use Webinar Jam for
Yeah.
this Wednesday night podcast, but it was a no-go, and I'm glad that we had the opportunity to do a test run,
Mhm.
Lisa, because
Yeah.
that at least Zoom was more accessible, and even in that, there's a few things I'm sure that can be upgraded.
Mhm.
Anything come to mind?
Not for right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that I've been in larger kind of conference settings where they're using Zoom, but they have transcripts and everything available, which is
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
My question for you, if you're comfortable with this, is,
Sure.
how can folks that are listening in on this call right now, what can they do today to start dismantling some barriers that folks with
Mhm.
disabilities face on the daily?
Yeah. Um, so on the individual level, a lot of it can be just starting with general education. Um, so a lot of, people, depending on what their, level of awareness is of people with disabilities, it might be low, it might be medium, it might be high. But if it is on the lower end, then, learning some things, or, finding some people to follow, or reading some articles, or, going to some websites, that can be a great way to start that education process.
Yeah, that's fair.
Mhm.
Anybody come to mind for you, or like websites that you use or recommend?
I mean, if you're starting, on the very general basis, then, cnib.ca
Yeah.
can be a good starting point. There's also another organization called Balance for Blind Adults in Toronto, and they have, some good information on their website as well. And, depending on where you are in the country or in the globe, there might be other disability agencies in your local area that might have some really good information as well.
Nice. Thank you so much for that. It's important, and we need to do that. We need to start somewhere. And it's okay that I think when we're learning about things, we're bound to kind of make mistakes and say the wrong words, and that's okay, right? Yeah, just kind of got to go from there.
Yeah, and I think also maybe another kind of starting point is sort of growing the awareness about the different types of disabilities, because often a lot of times people sort of think about disability in a certain way of like, oh well, it's a person in a wheelchair, and that there are lots of different types of different disabilities that go beyond that, and there's even disabilities that you can't see. So you could have someone walking down the street having various types of disabilities that you can't see on the outside.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, a lot of abilities and disabilities that aren't even visible. Yeah, that's a great point. So, Lisa, as you know, I am very vested in making healthcare more accessible. So, how can we make healthcare more accessible? I know this is a huge question. Want to take a stab at
it? I mean, in some ways, again, on a beginning level, it would be nice if healthcare staff knew what a white cane meant and knew how to do proper sighted guide. And just that they didn't just, grab someone's elbow or grab someone's cane as a way to try and guide them. And to also, know if someone is there with a white cane, that they're not going to just be able to follow you if you say, follow me, and start heading off in a different direction.
Yeah, it all sounds pretty common sense when we're not in the situation. Yeah, at the beginning, I mean, you even brought up a good point just then about grabbing someone's arm. Like if somebody random just grabbed my arm on the sidewalk, even if they were intending to help me, that can be just surprising and traumatic in itself. Yeah. In terms of even like sidewalks around the city and that kind of thing, Lisa, what are your thoughts on, getting around using transit, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so sometimes the sidewalks in Toronto can be somewhat crowded. So that for someone who is walking with a white cane, it can be hard to navigate around all the different obstacles. So I think there was a push to try and make it that there was a certain amount of the sidewalk that was kept clear and free from obstacles. And so that is, an important thing to keep in mind.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like where to put benches and that kind of thing.
Well, and just even sandwich boards and different signage or sidewalk displays, different things like that.
I'm thinking even like in terms of like walking across the street, like the street lights that aren't that don't actually have the little button, for the noise.
Yeah, and I mean they are working towards having more intersections have the audible pedestrian signal, but it is a work in progress.
Thanks for that, Lisa. There's so much I think that we can do, and I think just having these conversations in a public space is very useful.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just sort of like knowing that people with disabilities are out there and that they're interested in doing things that you might not think of can be a way to kind of break down some of those barriers and attitudinal barriers as well.
On that level, do you host any workshops or anything that you teach specifically?
I haven't done any specific workshops in a while around disability, but I have done some in the past.
Yeah, but I mean, not even around disability, but just like little workshops.
Um, Again, I've been focusing more on the one-on-one counseling work, but it is something that I do sometimes, depending on what topic the person is interested in.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. I'm thinking maybe, Lisa, in the future, there could be a potential for some collaboration in terms of mindfulness and meditation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Okay. Did you want to say anything else before we get into a little bit more question period from the audience?
No, I think this has been great.
Perfect. I do have one question, but I'll hold for effect and see if our guest has any questions as well. Dr. Liz, anything?
Hi, hi, everybody. No, I didn't necessarily have questions, but I just wanted to say, Lisa, it was very inspiring to listen to you today. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I went to school with Erin, and I'm visually impaired in one of my eyes. I'm legally blind in my left eye. And it was just nice to hear, another person in the industry, in the health and wellness industry, talk about their story. And I've also recently had some more acute hearing impairment as well that I've been struggling with for the last sort of 5 or 6 months, trying to figure out what to do about it and how I can go about practicing after spending so many years trying to get here to build a practice myself. So just thanks for being on with Erin today and talking, and it's very nice to hear. It's what I needed to hear today.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here, and being here to listen as well.
Dr. Liz, thank you. Yeah, thank you for being here, because it means a lot to folks that are, just coming from our own industry, naturopathic medicine. Not a lot of people are even talking about this. Liz, I didn't even know that you were legally blind, I think, until our 4th year in school.
Yeah, no, it's not necessarily something that comes up, and it's always been a struggle for me to know how to talk about it per se with people, because I do have one that works very well, but the other one does not work. And it definitely, thinking about it, like how it has affected life and growing up and accessing certain things and being just awful at sports. I can't catch a ball to save my life. I don't think, I was definitely an arts kid. So there's always an impact somewhere down the line. And it's definitely shaped kind of parts of me that I didn't think had been shaped because of it, just as I age and get older and wiser.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the main ableism barriers in terms of the healthcare is that there's this perception that people with disabilities aren't going to be workers, they're going to be your clients. And so that can impact how, other workers see, workers with disabilities. And then it can also put different assumptions and, ways of thinking, even towards their clients as well, too.
Oh my God, Lisa, yes, I'm like snapping, like, yes, honey, over here, because, oh my goodness, what you just said, it's a relief to hear you say that. And it's also like kind of saddening, because what I know of the healthcare field in general, and I'm making a vast, generalization here, but what do you think of when you think of someone who's in healthcare? You think of someone who's fairly healthy, who is probably most likely able-bodied, who probably is super smart, and you'd never think that they had some sort of any neurodiversity even, or anything like that. So it's tough to remove that image out of, for one, the patient's or the client's head, and two, the whole healthcare industry's head.
Yes.
Oh, it's wild. And so when we have more people that are, you know, open to talking and open to sharing. And thank you again, Liz, for sharing a little bit about your story. It's important to hear these things as practitioners as well, because there's so much that we can overcome just by being ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anything to add for that one?
No, I think that's good.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Lisa. I have a question as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I ask all my guests. And since this is the title of the podcast is Inspiring Insights. So what inspires you?
I think hearing the stories of my clients.
Nice.
So, you know, like hearing the things that they've gone through and, you know, seeing how they get through it and, you know, even, you know, helping them get through it, but still seeing those underlying stories of resilience that are there and just need to be teased out.
Keyword, resilience.
Nice.
Wow. Thank you so much, Lisa. This has been beautiful. How can folks get in touch with you, get in contact with you if they want to work with you further?
For sure. I have a website. It's counselingwithlisa.ca.
Okay, perfect. Counselingwithlisa.ca.
Yeah.
Any last words of wisdom that you want to share with the folks out there in the interwebs?
I think just going back to our conversation about mental health and stigma, you know, especially now in the times that we're dealing with in terms of the pandemic, you know, it's okay to ask for help and to reach out and to need that helping hand sometimes. And sometimes even with people with disabilities, we get stuck in this kind of narrative around being a burden and being dependent. And in reality, everyone needs help sometime. And if we were able to shift that burden narrative into a more positive way, it would just be helpful for everyone in general.
Yeah. Oh, that's so well said. I just want to leave it at that because that's beautiful and inspiring in itself.
Thank you.
So thank you, Lisa Derencinovic. It was so nice to have you here and so nice to connect over Zoom on a platform that's a little bit more accessible, and so nice to connect, you know, during a pandemic, which, you know, I would have never even connected with you maybe at all. And yet we are in the same city.
Yes.
Yeah. So everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for attending. This has been episode 26 of Inspiring Insights. You can learn more about us at theerinedwards.com. Thanks again. Have a lovely evening.